Well, good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining today. As usual, we produce this podcast week to week, and sometimes I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the topic du jour? What is the thing we want to talk about? And in my own, business, we're dealing with some wedding cancellation, rescheduling, contracty things. Unfortunately, I think that that's going to be more of a thing now. I've talked a lot on the podcast since last March when we started this that I think a lot of people did truly believe, okay, we're going to either postpone to next year, we're going to get married this year smaller, do something else next year. And I think now, as we see this dragging on and on, that might, I just had a phone call with one of our June grooms yesterday or the day before, and he said, if there's any more hiccups, they're just canceling, right? Like they're just totally off it. A lot of people are off it. So we're talking today about contracts, cancellations, refunds, why you should ask for them, why you shouldn't, all the different things. It's trying to see it from both the couple's point of view and also the vendor's point of view. And so Cindy is a planner and she has written a phenomenal blog about this that I've read, and it's been shared a lot online. And I thought, what better person than to come on? We can talk through this. I think it's very well written, and just kind of get your perspective and basically do your blog in podcast form. So thank you so much. Why don't you introduce yourself after that long intro and tell us who you are and what you do?
You got it. I'm Cindy Savage. I am the owner and wedding planner, and as of last year, officiant at Isle Less Traveled here in Seattle. And like everyone else in the wedding industry, I've been dealing with COVID and its effects on my business and my clients. And the TLDR of it is it sucks for everybody. But yeah, as you know, the article you mentioned, I wrote actually over the summer. So in July of last year, and it's now 6 months later. And in many ways, not a lot has changed, but we have now reached that point where a lot of folks, especially those who had weddings planned for earlier in 2020, are now approaching their postponed wedding date and thinking, am I allowed to swear on your podcast? I forgot.
Yes, we'll keep it a little.
And they're thinking, oh no, are we going to have to reschedule again, or should we just cancel? You mentioned speaking to one of your clients. I had, of course, I've had many clients who postponed their weddings from last year to this year. And I just had my first one from this year who just said, you know what, forget it. They were very kind. I'm very blessed to have just fantastic clients all around. And they very kindly were like, yeah, we kind of figured that a 225 person wedding in May this year probably wasn't going to happen. And they just decided to cancel everything. And I'm sure they will eventually get legally married. I don't believe that they did that yet. Although many of my clients did, like you said, did that last year with the anticipation of celebrating in a bigger way this year. So yeah, it's round two. Once more with feeling, right?
Yeah, well, and I think that's the hardest thing is, and I know, like I said, we've talked about it on here before, this whole idea that I think a lot of people really did believe, okay, we're going to postpone, or we're going to, we're going to do a small wedding this year, and then we're really going to do that thing next year. And life gets in the way, things get in the way. And I think people are having doubts. One of my wife's good friends, they are going to get married in October. They were going to get married last October, did the backyard wedding. And then now, we just did a podcast talking about the vaccines. How are we feeling timeline wise? And, they say Fauci says if all goes well, maybe by the fall, we'll be back to somewhat normalcy, right? Well, if I'm, someone planning a wedding in end of October, November, I don't know how I feel about that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I wanted to talk about today is this whole idea, we've, over, I guess it was last Monday, we had an elopement that was like wedding 300 and something for us. And so in pre-COVID, in the 300 plus weddings, we had done, I think we had one real cancellation where, contracts had to be enforced and things were paid. I have a very, escalating cancellation clause on my wedding contracts as it gets closer to the wedding date. And so what we're finding out
right,
now,
and that's very typical across our industry.
Yes,
I have that too.
And so, I only take 25% down, I don't, and I know some people do the 50% down, and that's fine. I don't feel comfortable holding that amount of money from a contract. We do 25, and then it's a year out, 9 months out, 6 months out, and then 3 months out. And as you cancel, things are, get escalated more and more up to where, if you're going to cancel 3 months out, it's non, refundable at that point. Does that jive with kind of what you would think?
Yeah, and it does vary a little bit depending on which part of the industry you're talking about. For example, as a planner, I'm doing a lot of work with my clients from the day we sign. So, my payments are structured a little bit differently. Most of my clients are on monthly payment plans, and for me, everything's non-refundable once you pay it because I'm always working for them as soon as they book. It's a little different, for example, with videographers, photographers. Yeah, there's absolutely prep work involved. Of course, there's the cost of holding a date, which we can talk about later. It's in the article you mentioned. But some other people are investing both time and hard costs ahead of time for your wedding. So caterers, florists, for example, they have to buy those flowers, the ingredients for the food. Bakers, the same thing, and prep all those things before your wedding actually happens. So, you know, depending on when you cancel, they may have already done some of those things. They may have already shelled out money for that stuff. Some people pay their staff either a percentage or a whole amount in advance of the wedding. So there's no matter what vendor it is, everyone's doing some amount of work before the wedding in addition to holding the date for you. So it does vary a little bit across the different parts, but 50% upfront and 50% about a month before the wedding is fairly typical for most vendors, and that does usually cover those kinds of hard costs that happen before the wedding too. But yeah, in a structured kind of graduated cancellation policy like that is also very common. And for the same reason, you have those upfront costs, but also the closer it is to a wedding date, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to rebook that date with somebody else if you lose it. So I don't know how it's worded in your contract or anybody else's contract, but in my contract, it's worded as liquidated damages, as in that's income for, my grocery bill next month that I was expecting to have. And if you pull out with only 3 months notice, I'm not likely to be able to book another wedding on that date and kind of recoup that loss.
Yeah, and as we get into all this too, and it is just fascinating to me. I mean, I know this isn't like the most pleasant of conversations, but it is really interesting. All
No,
the
it's
different
terrible.
It is, but and the whole idea too is as we get further into this cancellations, people say, well, why? If I booked, if I want to cancel, that might be my right or whatever. Right? Obviously, right, but what you have to think about too is where we have a limited number of inventory, right? I might get 6 different inquiries for the same May wedding date, and so
Mhm.
because we booked and whatever, because you choose to cancel, maybe 5 of those 6 other couples wouldn't have chosen to cancel, or would have chosen to postpone, or wouldn't have chosen to elope and then cancel their wedding now afterward, right? That also goes into that conversation, right? Where
Yeah.
uh, yes, you absolutely have the right to do that, but because of that, maybe not everybody else would have handled that situation the same way on there. Does that make sense? Am I
Right,
saying that
right,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
So,
and that's exactly why these sorts of clauses are in contracts.
so what is the thesis of your blog post for someone that's curious about it? And because it does seem to defend vendors a little bit, right? In terms of like, this is, why we are vendors. This is why,
Yeah.
deposits are not. What do you want to summarize it? Like
Yeah,
kind of talking
sure.
points?
It, the short version and where I think there is a disconnect is that our clients as a whole, they think I'm paying this person to work my wedding and the product they're delivering is whatever service they're doing for my wedding, planning it, providing the flowers, recording it on video photo or photograph or whatever. Um, but in actuality, we are providing that service not just for your wedding, but for your wedding on a specific date and in some cases at a specific time. So if you look at it, if you think about it in terms of inventory, so people say like, oh, I decided not to have this wedding. Why can't I give it back? Like at IKEA, I changed my mind about this desk. I can just return it anytime, within the year that I bought it, right? Or anywhere else. Most places have a return policy of 30 days or whatever. It doesn't matter. Um, and if you decide you don't want it or it was defective, you can return it. But for us, that piece of inventory, it's not our service. It is the combination of our service on that date. And the date is really what dictates our inventory. There's 52 weekends in a year. Almost everybody wants to get married on a Saturday. And most of y'all want to do it on a day when the weather's possibly going to be nice. So you don't see a lot of winter weddings, especially in colder places. You don't see a lot of August and July weddings in hotter places like, the southwestern desert areas, Texas, et cetera. So when you say, well, I'm no longer going to have this wedding on this date, can I get my money back? The real question is, well, can we resell that inventory? And it's the same reason we have that graduated cancellation policies, because you've put that inventory on hold. That's why most of us will call the first payment we take from you a retainer or a booking fee or a date hold fee or something like that. And it's because it's not only to pay for the services we provide or the products we provide, it's also to pay for holding that specific date. It's almost like a layaway plan, except we can't always resell it to somebody else, because once you've taken it, and particularly in the case of COVID, once you've taken March 17th, 2020, on March 18th, 2020, that date is expired. It's like a piece of fruit that has rotted. You could give it back, but it can't be resold. And, unlike a big grocery store that could maybe accept or reimburse you for rotting produce, the vast majority of wedding industry professionals are very small businesses. A lot of us are solopreneurs with part-time contract staff, and we count on every penny that comes into our bank account from y'all. And this year, usually in a given year, like, we don't have a lot of cancellations. Like, it's not most of you who say you're going to get married and book our services, you do it. And barring some kind of really bad working relationship with us, or a breakup of your relationship, or something tragic that causes the entire wedding to be called off, it's not common for weddings to be postponed or canceled. So we don't usually deal with very much of this. And with the pandemic, we have had to deal with not just the one every year or one every couple of years, maybe a couple a year if you're a higher volume vendor, that we typically deal with, but we are instead dealing with having all of our weddings postponed or canceled. And the other component to that, so that's why there's cancellation fees, and it's also why there's postponement or rescheduling fees. And that's because we've held, the rescheduling fee is essentially like buying that new piece of inventory, right? Buying that new date in our calendar. What's happened with all of these postponements is that our full 2020 calendar for a lot of us has now shifted to 2021. And not only does that mean we're servicing you for an additional year in a lot of cases, and again, it depends on what vendor you're talking about, how much additional work that might be. But we're also now having removed a second date from our inventory that we also can't sell to someone else. So if you got a postponement and your vendors didn't charge you for it, you basically got a 2-for-1 deal. You got 2 prime dates for the price of 1 prime date. And that's worth a fair amount of money. And if they charged you a postponement fee that was significantly less than whatever your first retainer was, that's still a pretty good deal, because it's like buy one, get the second one half off, right? It's like a little BOGO sale.
Yeah, and that's what we had tried to do a lot was, weddings. Luckily, most of our couples moved to non-prime dates,
Mm-hmm.
or we had a lot that moved to February, and now we're
Right.
moving those. But and that was fine, because I'm like, the fact of me working a wedding on February 11th or whatever, or we have a wedding on Friday the 12th, probably wasn't going to happen normally, right? But
right.
yeah,
that's like the open box discount, right?
yeah, right.
Can't give you a new one, but I can give you an open box one.
Yes. But then, we did that a lot with couples that wanted a prime date the next year. And, we did charge them a fee, and I tried to, if it was a prime date, and then I tried to give them a service that was like equal value, like something that wouldn't cost me, but like, okay, we can give you an extra, like the raw footage or whatever. We don't do that, but like, as an example, like that would be what we would do, is something that didn't cost me, but maybe to soften that blow, because that was a very difficult.
And I don't mean to by sort of like putting on the suit and armor for the vendor side of it. I don't mean to downplay how much this sucks for couples, because it sucks. It's terrible. You thought you were going to have a great big wedding, and now it's like, not only can you not have a date, which for some people was a super meaningful date in their relationship, or like, bless all those people who wanted 10-10-20-20. I'm so sorry. I think I had about a dozen inquiries for that date, and I had one booked, and guess what? They didn't get married on 10-10-20-20. So it sucks, because you were expecting the wedding you planned, You were expecting to be able to hug your friends and your family. You were expecting to be able to dance your face off. Um, and you were expecting to have it cost what you thought more or less it was going to cost. And so to be hit with all these rescheduling fees or losing retainer payments and stuff, it's a huge blow. It's a huge blow to couples too. But what I hear from a lot of couples is, well, the pandemic isn't my fault, so why should I have to pay for it? Which legit, it's not. But you know what? It's not our fault either. Why should we have to pay for it? And so really what's happening here is we're splitting the burden. We're giving you a new date at a discounted price and you're paying a little extra to have it. And it sucks for everyone. Nobody's happy about this. Yeah. I promise you, there's nothing more that wedding pros want than to get back to doing weddings as usual and to not have to postpone your dates. We don't want to charge you fees. I wish I could just move everybody's date and charge them nothing. But unfortunately, I'm not Jeff Bezos. I don't have billions of dollars sitting around to pay my rent with if I don't have money coming in. So I can't stay in business if I operate that way. And that's why we have these things. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you bring that up, it is an excellent point. I just did the second draw of the PPP loan, whatever that they did the one last year and then they approved. And to show that you were eligible for that second round, you had to have a decline of, I believe, 30%, at least one quarter, last year, or 2019 to 2020, because now we're in 2021. And I was 45% the whole year. It didn't matter what quarter, it didn't matter at all. Right. Yeah. And so that's, like you said, where it sucks for everybody. And, just imagine that. Imagine if you were getting 60 grand a year, 80 grand a year, whatever your salary was, and literally just chopping out 45% of that.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but then knowing that this next year, you're going to be making up a lot of that money anyway, right? Like a lot of that was shifted over. We have booked very few less new weddings for 2021 as we have moved over weddings from 2020 to 2021.
Exactly. So it's really becoming a multi-year issue for everyone involved. And I mean, lots of our clients understand because lots of people have lost their jobs or had their hours cut back. So they know what it's like to lose their income with no notice or have it significantly reduced. And it's true that what also is happening is it's not just like we have less dates to offer for 2021, but we also have less people booking with us for 2021, understandably, because there's still so much uncertainty. We're standing here today, it's February 10th when we're recording this. And, I might get vaccinated by April, May. We don't have any idea. And we're also hearing about new strains that are coming out that are more virulent, that can spread faster, which may or may not be stopped by the vaccines we currently have. So we just there's so much uncertainty that nobody honestly knows when we're going to be out of this and when we're going to be able to go back to weddings as usual. So, even everything I've written about COVID basically has become old news, within a week or two of it having been written. Although the thesis behind this article has nothing to do with COVID actually, but just is how the wedding industry and the event industry in general works. But we just don't know what's coming down the pipeline. And the reality is for 2021 and maybe even 2022, we all collectively, vendors and engaged people, we're going to need to reimagine what a wedding looks like if we want to be able to have them this year.
And one other point I wanted to bring up too, when you were talking earlier about, facilitating, the dates and the fees and all that kind of stuff, because I got an email today from Apple and it was interesting because, their big thing is always like, sell us back your old devices. Like we'll recycle them, right? We'll give you money. We'll do, and like you said, when you're dealing with a small business like a wedding vendor, right, where maybe we're servicing 10 dates to 50 dates to 100 dates a year, right? We just don't have that infrastructure in place like Apple does. Like, well, we can buy 1 billion devices back and like shine them all up and send them out. And, that they have this whole infrastructure set up. Where if when you once you take a date, you would be amazed how many emails you get per the same date every year, whatever date that is. July 1st.
There's always dates that are super popular and sometimes it's sensible, like 10, 10, 20, 20. Pretty number dates, But 4, 3, 2, 1. Anybody doing April 3rd, 21, 21, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like those kinds of numbers are always anything that can make a palindrome with the month. Anyways, there's always numbers that are popular, but then there's always other dates that are just like, who made this date popular? We have no idea, right? But then you'll get like 10 inquiries for the same date, where you have weekends on either side you got no inquiries for. So it's there's just some kind of collective consciousness, I believe, about about which wedding dates are the right ones.
Well, absolutely, but like I said, so what couples don't get is if I book July 1st, whatever for you, any other email I get from them, it's not, oh, hey, thanks for your inquiry. Well, I have a wedding that day, but in the circumstance and maybe it cancels, it doesn't happen. Like, why don't you, can I have a month to get back to you? It's like, no, I mean, you tell them like,
Right.
we're reserved on that date. Thank you, best of luck. Here's someone else that could be available. Whatever your policy is, right? But there's no like waiting game around like, well, could you give me a month just in case it doesn't work out with this other couple? Once it's booked, it's
because once you're
booked.
booked, you're booked, right? And exactly, and that's why we collect a retainer and have a contract, because we're holding that date. We're actively turning away other potential income for you. That's why we have those fees. But yeah, and it's not like we can be like, well, I'm not available July 1st, but how'd you like to get married July 6th instead? I got that one open, or maybe the 23rd. It's just not, because I'm a planner, occasionally for me, I have flexibility around the date if I'm helping someone find their venue. But other than venues, it's really, once you got a venue, you got a date and it's solid. And it's not like you're gonna be like, well, my venue gave me this date, but my photographer wants that date. So you don't shift it. It's just not how it works.
I remember when, I think the first year we ever did the wedding show, because we got in really late to the Seattle wedding show. Like, I think we got signed in like October, November, and the things in January. And I remember that first show, like, if all these couples would just have booked a different, because like we had so many booked already, and then you're like, oh, we're booked on that date, we're booked on that date, we're booked, and in my head, but it's like that doesn't work that way, because couples pick the ones, they pick the Saturdays, they pick May to October, and then they ride with it. And so yeah, there's no like, well, August 8th is, but what about the 9th? Let's really working on that. It's like, no, I mean they're set, but especially by the time they come to us, there's no I had a long conversation with this mother that she was I'm trying to plan last minute for my daughter and all this. I said, I'll tell you, if it was Sunday, they would have the smorgasbord of anybody they wanted to hire.
Right. You want to get whatever vendors you want. Get married on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
We're all free.
Everybody's free. So
maybe not in 2021, because we've had some
yeah,
I actually have a Tuesday wedding this year because it got moved from last year. But yeah, if only we could assemble our dream teams of vendors and then pool their availability and then pick our date, right? Which technically you could do. You just really probably want to start with a planner who can deal with that for you, because it's a lot of scheduling logistics, which are no fun for almost anyone, except those of us who think it's a fun thing to do all day.
It is
few and far between, but
it's nice, to get those. Every once in a while you get that, like, hey, we've got 2 dates in mind. Like, which one? Like, that is always like the dream one that you hardly ever get.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting too with the rescheduling. Like, that has been, because we've been trying to keep our vendor teams intact. It's been an interesting thing to be like, oh, here's our dream vendor team. Now, what dates do y'all have available that we can make work? I kind of like, not to reinvent the wedding industry, but wouldn't it be cool if that was the way we worked a little bit?
I think so.
I would enjoy it personally.
So something I want to talk to you about is, and then I want to get into specifics here in a little bit. Force majeure, right? That was the big thing.
Buzzwords.
Yeah, that was the big, all the blog posts and all the contracts were rewritten. Force majeure, that's basically like act of God is preventing you, right, from doing it. And I read that it's the only time, COVID or whatever aside, in the last 3 years that force majeure would have ever happened for us was that like sliver of whatever a month in Washington, right? When like nothing was allowed at all. Like it was a stay-at-home order and literally nobody could work.
Right.
But ever since then, you've been able to get married, just not necessarily the wedding that you wanted, which is regrettable and that's terrible. But by Governor Inslee saying, okay, everyone has to stay at home, right? Was that am I reading that right? That was the only time from your understanding where you really could have said like, hey, act of God, we can't get married right now?
Well, I am not a lawyer, but
yes. Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, this is a wedding.
I am not a lawyer, but all the lawyers I've talked to seem to agree. Yes. So I think there's some gray areas in some places but for most of us, guest count is not a line item you'll find. I mean, you may see it for reference on our proposals, but I can tell you that there's literally nothing in my contract about how many guests are at your wedding. Now, I'm going to staff it differently if you have 300 people versus 30, but my contract is not dependent on the size of your wedding, and most vendor contracts are not. There are some like caterers who have a minimum, either a minimum number of guests or a minimum spend. Um, but for the most part, from a legal perspective, if you two can get married and celebrate it in some fashion, then force majeure is not preventing you from is not preventing is not preventing us from performing our part of the contract, nor is it preventing you, the couple getting married, from performing your responsibilities under the contract. So, people have given different amounts of leeway for their own businesses, and we all have to do what we feel is best and ethical, and in that sense. But from a legal perspective, yeah, that the time when we were literally not allowed to, per government order, that would have been the time when that applied. And at this point, people who are booking new contracts, it's been a year almost. We've or it has been a year, I guess, that we've had a global pandemic running. And if you're booking your wedding now with your wedding vendors now, you know that it's a possibility that that COVID. So the point of force majeure is to relieve you of your duties that you've agreed to, your responsibilities under the contract, in the event that unforeseen circumstances make it impossible for you to do them. So, an earthquake happens and your venue is reduced to rubble on the ground. Your venue can't provide you a venue on your wedding date. That's a force majeure situation. But we're beyond that now, legally.
Yes, and I just think it's so important to know that, because and we just had one of our couples just we postponed them again. They postponed to 2022, and they said, because of everything, we can't have the wedding of our dreams, and it's not what we envisioned, and we want to move it. And we had already gone through, the last year to this year, we had negotiated a new contract, and I felt it was prudent for us to just extend that another year, right? That was a personal decision that that Reed made, that advice, whatever. But I felt like, okay, we had already kind of like ripped that band-aid off the first time, but I could have said, we need to charge you again. There's nothing about anything going on right now. I mean, knock on wood, that is going to happen, that is preventing you from getting married, whatever day whatever day it was this year, right? That it might only be 30 people, and we might have to do a live stream and zoom in a bunch of people or whatever. But there's nothing that prevents that. I chose that, the other option of that. But I think that's important for couples to know that just legally where. And again, we're not lawyers, but legally where the understanding is if you can't get married and have a wedding, right? I mean, we're going to be there.
Right. And, the difficult part is that weddings are generally once, maybe twice or three times in a lifetime events, right? They're not something we do often. And both culturally and individually, we have big feelings around them. And for a lot of us, we've been raised to have an ideal of what our wedding will be from basically the time we, popped out of our mother's womb. So it's difficult because from a legal perspective, and from our perspective as vendors, putting aside for a moment that we're also humans and we have empathy, but from a legal and business perspective, your wedding with us is a business agreement. We have a contract, and that's what we operate under. And the contract says, if this happens, that, if that happens, that, if you reschedule, you pay this, etc. And we do that to protect our businesses and our livelihoods. But we're also human beings who have our own feelings about weddings. Many of us are or have been married, and we understand what goes into it. And we have empathy for the situation. So, that's why you see a lot of people having different, there's not like a unified policy in the wedding industry about how to deal with COVID, because we each kind of have to do not only what's best for our businesses, but also what's best in our hearts. So, I've made my policies a little bit more flexible. I've been allowing anyone to reschedule within 6 months of their original date, whether we're shut down or it's just not the wedding you thought it was going to be. And after that, I'm charging reschedule fees because I have to stay in business, not because I want to, because I really hate doing it. But But that is a luxury that I can afford right now, and not everyone can. And on the on the flip side, like some people can afford to charge no rescheduling fees and move things all around. So there's a lot of variation, and there's not a clear one size fits all approach to this from the industry. But I can pretty much promise you that we all have a lot of empathy for our clients going through this. I mean, it's my couple that just decided to cancel. Like, I felt terrible sending them a cancellation agreement and being like, "Okay, so sorry, bye." Right? Like, because I don't know about you, Reed, but I know a lot of people, vendors, like we become friends with our clients, especially those of us who spend a lot of time getting, as a planner. I see my clients usually at least once a month, my full planning clients, and I email back and forth and text with them, and um, I care deeply about them and their lives, not just about the money they're bringing my business. God, nobody gets into this industry for the money, I promise. But it's not as good as they make it out to be on TV. But yeah, right. Reed, you can't see, but Reed's doing the like the dollar, the stripper dollar thing. Um, yeah, so it's just really it's heart wrenching. It's been a really hard year for everyone, and we're all, we're so, and not only that, like we look forward to your weddings. We look forward to being there and celebrating with you and seeing those happy moments, and um, capturing them and making them happen, feeding you delicious things, making the room beautiful. Like, we love what we do, and we are sad that we don't get to do it with you right now, or that we have to do it in a different capacity. Although I will say that I am personally very, very fond of teeny tiny weddings, and I think they're the best. So if that's what you got to do this year, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what it looks and feels like. And it also gives you a little more room in your budget with less people. Like, you can spend money on things that maybe you wouldn't have spent on before. Like, maybe now you don't have to DIY your centerpieces because that extra catering money can go to flowers or something. But um, anyway, yeah,
Uh,
been
so I,
tough.
yeah, so I want to talk some specifics now. I don't want this to come across as you know, airing dirty laundry or anything. I want to because I have a feeling that this same circumstance is going to happen a lot of times for a lot of vendors, and so that's my goal with this. And so I really hope it doesn't come across as like, airing anything out of and obviously no names or anything, whatever. But I really just wanted it to come across as like, if you see other things like this happening, this would be maybe advice or things to do or whatever. So we had a couple that was going to get married last June, and very early on they decided to postpone, and we, per the contract, we waived the reschedule, postpone to another off-peak date this coming year, and that was fine. And so so we moved them, whatever. So I found out from them a week or two ago that they had decided to get eloped in December, and now they are, because of COVID, and I would imagine because they're married now. That's my putting my spin on it. But they're saying, but anyway, so they're canceling their wedding this year, right? So
Mhm.
we postponed it. They've got engaged, or they got eloped, all this kind of stuff. And so the big thing that came to mind for me, and I had tried to express this, was I really wish that we would have had conversations about this in November and not February, right? And the response that I got was, we would never discuss things like that with any of our wedding vendors. Why would we discuss personal decisions like that with our wedding vendors about trying to get married or whatever? And I would think, I've talked with many of my couples about postponing or options, or what do you think? Am I off base with that? That a conversation would have been helpful in November or October or whenever before than 2 months after the fact?
Oh, I don't think so. No. And I mean, I do think it depends a little bit on your relationship with any one specific couple, and also your role in the industry. So again, as a planner, I'm in very regular contact with all of my clients, more so than most other vendors are. And I think from a vendor perspective, part of it is just being very proactive. Like, I have been sending my all of my clients updates, no matter what they've told me their plans might be or how they might have changed every couple of months. Like, here's what's happening. Here's what we're allowed to do right now. Here's how I'm enforcing my contract policies. Here's what's going to happen if you reschedule. Here's what's going to happen if you cancel. So I think to some extent, just getting ahead of it from a communications perspective is really important. But I do think if you're a couple listening to this podcast and you're thinking about making a change, if you have a wedding planner, definitely talk to them. And if you don't have a wedding planner, yeah, do reach out to your vendors, because like I said earlier, we do care. But again, like, and I'm not going to say necessarily promise that you would get money back or more money back, but the sooner you can let us know that your plans are changing, the more time we have to potentially rebook the date, or just strictly maybe it's farther out in terms of that kind of graduated scale of cancellation fees and stuff like that. So, and the other thing is, for a lot of your vendors, if you decide you're going to go ahead and get legally married just in a tiny celebration, even if you're still planning a big celebration, they may be willing to come and provide their services for your elopement or micro wedding. And, then if you ultimately decide to cancel, you will have at least gotten some of those services, right? So you don't lose. So the thing is, when you cancel, you basically, for most vendors, you're going to lose whatever payments you've made. You're not likely to get refunds, especially at this point. We're so far into it, especially if we're getting to people that are on their potentially third or more reschedule. It's not easy to be giving out refunds left and right with all these cancellations, especially if your contract doesn't provide for them, which most don't. So
Yeah, I would,
but yeah, communication is big.
Yeah, and and I think I was probably a lot better about that, early on, and maybe
Yeah.
I did take, my foot off the gas with that a little bit, but I also think like uh regulations in October maybe don't matter for a June wedding yet, just because how many
Yeah.
things have we seen change in the last,
Right,
whatever.
exactly. And things change so quickly that it's just, it's hard to say what's going to happen even 3 weeks from now, and never mind 3 or 4 months from now. We just don't know. So, there's sort of two sides to it. One is like, I don't know, wait till it's a little bit closer and see what's in place then, and then we'll make a decision, which is fine. I just kind of recommend you have a drop dead date of at least a month out, because there's a lot of things that get finalized in that last month that will, affect the costs and stuff. It's when people start ordering their supplies and their ingredients and finalizing details and all that stuff. And it's also when a lot of final payments are due and when a lot of people have a final cutoff for a graduated cancellation fee. So there's a lot of good, like just strictly money reasons to make a decision by the 1 month mark, ideally a couple weeks before it. And then there's kind of the other camp that's just like, I can't even deal with this anymore, and I just want out, which I frankly totally understand.
Yeah, because it's not something that it's not something anyone wanted or planned. But I do think, and like you said, um, a lot of decisions and things were handled right, postponing weddings of last year under the presumption that they would indeed happen this year or at some point. And so now, canceling, because I just to emphasize kind of what I said at the beginning of the show, I do think a lot of people thought they're going to get married this year. They maybe
Yeah,
are not now,
absolutely.
right? That are going to either elope or cancel, whatever. And that's what I'm trying to address today with all this stuff. Is you maybe did really think we were going to get married next year, but also your vendors may or may not have charged you cancellation fees or scheduling fees or whatever under the presumption that it was going to happen next year. And now, if it
Right.
really is never going to happen, then that is a different conversation entirely than like, hey, we're just going to
Mm-hmm.
push this back a year, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
well, this thing that I held, that we met about and we zoomed about and you did all the paperwork about and you sent over and you held the date and that date went by and you turned down other weddings and then you've dealt with me emailing you every week for 6 months and now we're back now and then you did all the reschedule and that was another 2 hours of paperwork and you've done all this stuff and then now we're not canceling or now we are canceling. Like that's a really different conversation, than
Yeah.
right. Do you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
And I think, at least what I'm seeing in my circles is that people who maybe waived a rescheduling fee in the first round are now like, I just can't afford to do that anymore. When realistically, you probably couldn't have afforded to do it in the first place, maybe shouldn't have. But I think in some ways that like set clients up wrong because they said, "Oh, well, they didn't charge me last time to move it. Why would they charge me this time to move it?" So in a way, we sort of screwed ourselves on that one if we didn't do a fee the first time, or if we had a very lenient policy the first time. But we're all trying to figure this out. You know, pretty much none of us have ever dealt with a global pandemic on this scale before. I think the last time that happened was before anyone who is currently living was alive, maybe, or if they are, they're way too old to be a wedding industry pro. You got to be a little younger for the way we work. Um, but yeah, I think I also think that a lot of wedding vendors realized last spring where they might have had some holes in their contracts and holes in their processes. And a lot of those holes have now been plugged. So you're going to see different policies, um, more fees, restrictions on how many times you can postpone before you need to sign a whole new contract and pay a whole new retainer, or limitations on how far out you're allowed to push the date, that kind of thing. So all of those things have started becoming more prevalent for a lot of folks because of last year, because we realize how at risk our businesses are in a situation like this. And so, yeah, that's definitely going to be a thing. Um, and I think for couples, it's going to be even more difficult as they look at either postponing yet one more time or canceling altogether. In either way, they're going to lose some money. They might have to pay you more money. If they're canceling, they might have lost not only an initial deposit or most of their payments, but also a rescheduling fee, which now seems like, why did I even pay that? Right. So it's, once again, it just sucks. It sucks all around.
Yeah, it
But yeah,
does.
I do think people are getting a little more kind of firm in their policies because of what we all went through last year.
Yeah, I mean, and that was basically kind of my just my interpretation of everything was um this, COVID is an issue now. It's going to be an issue. Yeah, that is not like you said earlier, any contracts now that are entered into anything, whatever. And you know, we've done weddings. We've done weddings. I've done weddings every week. We've done weddings, small weddings, big, whatever weddings. And so, I look at this as if you had booked a couple in September and then they decided to cancel or whatever for their summer wedding, I would handle that the same way now, right? We had a
Mhm.
wedding, the only like the first cancellation we ever had. I mean, it was the Wednesday before. Dorothy and I we were getting married. We were at the courthouse getting our paperwork for our August wedding, and I got an email, and it was or a call or whatever from the father of the groom, like, "Hey, we're canceling on Sunday, right, or on Saturday, right?" And that would be how I look at this now. I mean, I look at any cancellations now. I mean, it can be because of COVID, but that's not the be all end all now that is gonna. I think that's gonna
Right.
ride everything. You know what I'm saying? The same
Yeah,
way it
yeah. People are going
dictated
to kind
every.
of either revert back to or revert forward to their new policies, and there's going to be a lot less flexibility, I think, on those things going forward. And I know for I added a new clause to my contract to provide for that sort of 6 months grace period of rescheduling due to a pandemic or any other force majeure event. I didn't have that in my contract before. I did have rescheduling fees and cancellation clauses, of course, but um, those things are, now if someone canceled, if it's because of COVID, it's because not COVID. Kind of, it's all it's all cancellation or it's all rescheduling as far as my contract and how the finances work. And I think we're just going to see more of. I think we're going to see an industry wide kind of move to um, enforce those policies even when it's a COVID related postponement or cancellation.
It's tough. The first one of these really, we had, March, April, May, June, we had gone through all these different, whatever, and move stuff and done all this other stuff. And the first real sticking point we had a September couple, and it was the first time that they came out and they said, we're canceling, and that is it, and we want the money back, and like we're canceling. And I told him, I said, I've rescheduled, 30 weddings. We've downsized a bunch of other weddings. We've done we've applied the retainer just to cover the ceremony, or we've, split stuff and done whatever. We've done every which way of any sort of bending over that we can. But because you're coming to me with this unflexible decision of, we're canceling and that's it, we're not doing it, then that is where a lot of vendors are going to put their walls up, right? And go, well,
Yeah.
this is a contract. This is what we have. Whereas if you had come and said like, hey, these are and that's what I had mentioned before, again, you might not really care what Reed the videographer says about, and I absolutely understand my place in the world or whatever, but I'm saying if you had come to your vendors with flexibility versus like, brick, whatever, inflexibility, like it
Right.
allows for a different conversation and it allows for different options than just
Absolutely.
saying, this is what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a client who was supposed to get married last October, and they decided in the summer that they didn't want to, they didn't think it was going to happen, and they decided to elope. And I was able to convert their contract from a wedding management contract to an officiating contract. And I went and officiated their ceremony instead. Obviously not everybody provides multiple services, so that's not always going to be an option. But there are, yeah, you're right. If you as the couple approach it as, we don't think this is going to happen the way we want it to, what other options do we have at this point? That's a much more flexible conversation than just like, F it, we're out.
I would say, yeah, the same would go as, let's say something happened where I had to, I couldn't perform my duties anymore, or whoever didn't. I think I see this a lot, photographers online. Hey, something came up. I got pregnant. Someone's sick. Someone, whatever. And I'm going to have to cancel. But can we get a couple names of people that would be available, that would be a good fit? Let me vet you guys so that when I go to talk to this couple, I have some options, right? And that'd be the same thing for me. If I was like, hey, I can't do it, but I got this other company. They're going to do it, or we'll give you a refund for whatever, or like give them a couple of different
Right.
options than just
Right.
being like, yeah, I can't shoot your wedding, like, sorry, and walk away. It's a
Right.
different conversation to have at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Yeah, and with a lot of vendors, there are other, if your wedding can't happen the way you want it to, or you're just not going to get along with it, there are perhaps other ways that your monies you've already been paid and even balances that are coming up due can be applied. Maybe you're not going to have a wedding anymore, but I can now plan your first baby shower, or someone can just come do a couple portraits for you outside at home and distanced, or, take a video of you together, or deliver you a batch of cupcakes. There's event pros were really flexible. Weddings aren't the only kind of events that exist. So there are other milestones in your lives, and just simply fun things that you can do. Now, again, every vendor has to do what's best for them. So not all vendors are going to be able to let you be flexible with your commitments that way, but you won't know if you don't ask. And if you don't ask respectfully, it's much less likely to happen.
well, I think that's a good, yeah.
Attitude matters.
It does. It does. And it's that, it's easier to ask forgiveness it's easier to beg forgiveness than this ask permission. Well, not all the time when it comes to contracts. And so that, I would say that sometimes it is easier to ask
Yeah.
permission, or not, that's just the same. But I mean, I think it's just
Yeah.
easier to have that conversation before things happen. Then they go, hey, we got married 2 months ago or 3 months ago or last year, or we're not doing this. And we've already, we've canceled everything and you're the last person to know, or whatever the situation may be. Right. But it's very much easier to have that conversation when everyone's on equal footing than when you feel like you're
Right.
kicked in the butt or whatever.
Right. And it's not, that's not even just COVID specific, but like,
Right.
I'm sure I'm not the only person who has, for example, a late fee clause in my contract if you pay me late. But I'll tell you what, if you talk to me the week before your payment is due and say, my hours got cut back this week, can we have an extra week on that payment? Or, I actually had a client last month who was having trouble making the payment through my online portal. And they emailed me and they said, hey, I know this payment is due, but I can't get it to go through. And I was like, you know what? Don't worry about it. Go get a good night's sleep. Try it again tomorrow. If it's still not working, I will troubleshoot it on my end, and I'm not going to make you pay a late fee. So it's, people are much more flexible. It just comes back to communication again. I think, we're like I said, we're all human people. There's no bots making your wedding happen. And we're all very excited to do that for you and provide our services to you. And we want you to have the best friggin' day ever. So if there's something we can do to make it better for you, just talk to us about it. And if you're struggling with a payment or something that you need to do, like I sometimes have clients who just like need a break from planning. And if I sit there and bug them every week and they don't reply to me, I'm like, oh my God, are they dead on the side of the road in a ditch? Did something terrible happen? Do they suddenly hate me and not want to work with me anymore? We're insecure a lot, a bunch of us. I do, but if they just email me and say, you know what, I just like, I can't right now. Can we just take a break from planning? I'm like, sure, I'll get you back in a couple of weeks. So there's communication just really is important, and not just communication, but proactive communication. If there's something that your vendors expect of you or that you expect of your vendors and it's not being met, just don't run out and like smash us on social media. Like just pick up the phone and give us a call, right?
Yeah, we're all here. Most of us are online,
Yeah,
on like Instagram, whatever, that, it's very easy to get a hold of people if you need
for
to, and,
sure.
and figure out, it's different than I think 10, 15 years ago. And you're like, well, I didn't really hear from that person. Like, is my photographer still alive? Like, what's going on? I mean, it
Right.
is, I would think for the most part, it's a little different now, just in terms of like knowing what's going on with people. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
is there any other, before we let you go, any other talking points in that blog that we didn't hit on that you're like, this is reads a dummy for not asking me about this?
I'm just gonna scroll through real quick.
And I'll obviously link the blog and all
Yeah,
that too. We'll include all that. I just want to make sure that anything, to say out loud.
I think we pretty much covered it. Something that I've said a lot since I wrote this post, which really isn't in any way addressed by it, is that this is not any of my clients, thankfully, because I have the best clients there ever have been. You all should be jealous of me and my awesome clients. But uh, is I see a lot of people out there going like, well, my venue's not going to let me have a wedding that complies with the current mandates. So does anybody have a private property I can do it on instead? And I got to tell you, this really enrages me. I I have been very flexible with my clients and very specific about what kind of weddings I'm going to take because I care about public health. And I also care about remaining in business because I love what I do. And I am not going to risk my business license for you to have an event that's currently illegal. So I really wish that people would stop that.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree that yes, just the the thesis on this podcast for a long time has been focusing on what the things that we can do and not focusing on the things that you can't do. And that
Right.
is a perfect example of that. Is why I can't do it here. So where can I
Yeah.
do it? And I
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I always embrace, what are the things you can do with the things that are allowed or that you're
Exactly.
allowed to do.
And right now in Washington, I think we moved to phase 2 here in King County. To be honest, I don't have any weddings anytime soon. I sort of been like not paying that
That's same, yeah.
close of attention to it lately, but I think we moved to phase 2 and I think that lets us have 100 or is it 200?
It's like it's crazy.
I think it's 200. I think you can now have
yeah.
up to 200 or 25% capacity. Like
Yeah.
you can have a wedding.
Yeah.
You can have dancing. You just can't have everybody dancing at once. So you can send your groups up one table at a time. You can have multiple dance floors. Like you said earlier, there's only been that one very short period of time where you really couldn't have a wedding. And since then, we've had everything from like 5 people to 200 people allowed. And we've gone back and forth a few times between those extremes. But there are lots of things you still can do, and you can still have a beautiful, wonderful wedding. It just might not be the one you originally envisioned. And I will say that whether you realize it or not, almost every couple has already experienced and dealt with this phenomenon because people come to a wedding saying, I have X amount of dollars, and that's budget will do it every time. I have X amount of dollars, and that's how many dollars I'm going to spend on my wedding. And then a month later, you found out how much weddings cost, and you have either found more money or you've changed your vision. And for most people, it's going to be you've changed your vision. And that's all we're doing here. We're saying the parameters that are what's available to you has changed. This time it's not number of dollars, it's number of guests, it's amount of excuse me. It's the amount of people that can dance together at the same time. It's whether you can be inside. the parameters have changed, and you have to change your vision with it if you want to still have a wedding.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just was looking at my sheet. Yeah, we did 41 weddings last year. So please don't tell me that you can't get married right now in the time. It's like the movie I Love in the Time of Cholera or whatever, right? That
Yeah.
movie was that like Robert
Actually never
Redford.
saw it, but I'll
I
just
don't know,
pretend like I know what you're
yeah,
talking about.
but it's like Love in the Time of COVID. But no, but I mean that we had 40 weddings last year. All legal, everything, all that. So yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, change the parameters, but don't change. Yes, I just to echo that.
Yeah,
Yes, I think
exactly.
that's right.
I only did 3, and 2 of them were elopements, and the other one was before COVID hit. So a little different story on my end. But that one that shifted from 110 people in rural Wisconsin to a sunrise elopement in Glacier National Park,
Not bad.
they're not sorry.
No.
I promise you, they're not sorry. They had a wonderful and exquisitely beautiful wedding, and again, we're all rolling with the punches here, and sometimes the punches are those that require you to change your assumptions and your ideals to fit what's currently allowed.
We're
and
human.
That doesn't mean your wedding is going to suck.
No, we're allowed to grow. I say we do an XFL podcast. We're adults. We grow. We change opinions. We better ourselves. We grow. And so it's okay to do that. That's my eardrums get blown out. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on. I kind of dropped this on you. I said, hey, it's just on my mind. I know you have this great blog. We'll link the blog and all that stuff. Where would you like people to know about you and the services you offer before we let you go?
Oh, I am available pretty much everywhere at ILS Travel, which is AISLELESSTRAVELED, or ILStravel.com. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I have a Twitter account, which I rarely use. So that's, if you tweet at me, I'll notice it, but don't expect me to instigate. But I'm pretty much everywhere. And yeah, you can contact me with any of those avenues.
Well, I so appreciate it. Like I said, and I'll link to your Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast we did. Just really, hands-on planning, really good. Have wedding planner will travel kind of mentality. And so, before, and we'll get back to that again. So, thank you so much again for this. I hope this wasn't too much. I hope this was more education than airing dirty laundry. So I appreciate it.
I didn't air any dirty laundry, so I don't know what you're talking about.
From I get in trouble sometimes on my other podcast. So thank you very much again.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.